The alarm didn't go off. Or maybe it did, and Daniel Carter just didn't hear it through the fog of exhaustion that had become his permanent state of being. "Dad! Dad! We're late!" Lucy's voice cut through his sleep like a knife. 7 years old and already more responsible than he was. Daniel's eyes snapped open to see his daughter standing beside his bed, already dressed in her school uniform, backpack on, holding his car keys. What time? He grabbed his phone. Lucy's school started at 9. His new job interview was at 9:30. No. Daniel scrambled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's shirt. When had he even gone to sleep? After midnight, definitely. After finishing the proposal that was now somewhere in the disaster zone that used to be his home office, "I made us toast," Lucy said, impossibly calm for a child who should be panicking. Daniel stared at his daughter. 7 years old. Just 7. 18 months ago, Sarah had collapsed at work. Aneurysm. Gone before the ambulance arrived. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone. And Daniel had been drowning ever since. He'd tried. God, he'd tried. But being a single parent while working 60-hour weeks at Sterling & Co. had nearly destroyed both of them. Missed pickups, forgotten lunches, the time he'd fallen asleep during Lucy's school play, and the teacher had to wake him up. The final straw came 3 weeks ago when he'd missed Lucy's parent-teacher conference entirely because he'd been stuck in a client meeting that ran 4 hours over. Miss Peterson had called him at 11 p.m., concerned. Lucy had waited in the classroom until 8 o'clock, reading the same book over and over, certain her dad would come. That night, Daniel had made a decision. He couldn't be both the provider and the parent his daughter needed. Not at Sterling. Not with their culture of dedication that really meant sacrifice everything. He'd started applying for new jobs the next morning. Now, 23 days later, he had exactly one interview lined up. Northbridge Marketing Group. Smaller company. Supposedly family-friendly, which probably meant they'd smile sympathetically during the interview and then hire someone without complications. "We have to go now," Lucy said, tugging his arm. "You can change in the car. I can't change in the cruise. Dad." She looked up at him with Sarah's eyes. Clear, determined. "We're already late. This makes us less late." She was right. She was always right these days. Daniel grabbed his interview clothes, and they ran. He dropped Lucy off at school with 30 seconds to spare, promising he'd be on time for pickup. She kissed his cheek and whispered, "You've got this, Dad," before running inside. He wanted to cry. Instead, he drove. The interview was downtown, 15 minutes away. He had 12 minutes to get there. Park, change, and somehow look like a competent professional instead of a disaster barely holding it together. He changed shirts at a red light. Nearly caused an accident. Arrived at Northbridge with his tie crooked and his shirt misbuttoned. The receptionist took one look at him and winced. "Mr. Carter? I know. I'm late. I'm so sorry. Actually, Miss Morgan is running behind too. You're fine." She smiled. "Coffee?" Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Don't cry at the receptionist. Don't cry at the receptionist." He fixed his shirt in the bathroom, washed his face, tried to look like someone worth hiring. When he returned to the lobby, a woman was walking toward him. She was tall, professional, with dark hair pulled back and sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. She looked at Daniel, really looked, and her expression shifted to something he couldn't quite name. Understanding, maybe. "Mr. Carter, I'm Rachel Morgan, Director of Marketing. I'm sorry to keep you waiting." "No. I'm the one who Daniel started. It's fine." Her voice was calm. "Certain. Let's talk in my office." And for the first time in 18 months, Daniel felt like, maybe, possibly, he could breathe. Rachel Morgan's office wasn't what Daniel expected. Instead of the sterile corporate space he'd grown used to at Sterling, her office had plants, real ones. Photos on the walls, not motivational posters, but actual photographs of places she'd traveled. A kid's drawing stuck to the side of her file cabinet with a magnet. "Please, sit." Rachel gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'm fine, thank you." Daniel placed his folder on his lap, acutely aware that his resume probably looked amateur compared to the other candidates. Rachel opened his file, scanned it briefly, then closed it and looked directly at him. "Mr. Carter, I'm going to be honest with you. Your resume is impressive, but it also shows 3 unexplained gaps in the last 18 months. 4 instances of leaving positions after very short periods, and your references from Sterling were diplomatic." Daniel's heart sank. "I can explain. I'm sure you can. But before you do, let me ask you something different." Rachel leaned forward. "What time does your daughter's school get out?" Daniel blinked. "What? Your daughter? Lucy, right? 7 years old. What time does she get out of school?" 3:15. Daniel answered automatically. "But I don't understand what that has to. And your previous job required you to be in the office until 6, minimum. Frequently later. It wasn't a question." Daniel nodded slowly. "Mr. Carter Daniel, may I call you Daniel?" She didn't wait for an answer. "I know what happened to your wife. I'm very sorry, and I know what it's like to try to be everything to everyone and feel like you're failing at all of it." "You're a single parent?" Daniel asked. "My sister is. I help raise my nephew." Rachel gestured to the drawing on her file cabinet. "That's Tommy. He's 6, and I've seen what Jamie goes through every single day, trying to hold down a job at a company that says they value work-life balance, but really just values work." Daniel felt something tight in his chest start to loosen. "This position," Rachel continued, "ends at 4:30, unless there's a genuine emergency, which happens maybe twice a year. We don't do FaceTime culture here. You do your work, you do it well, and then you go home to your kid. That's the deal." "That sounds impossible." "It's not." Rachel smiled. "It just requires actually meaning it when we say we support families. We have flexible schedules. We have a parent room if you ever need to bring Lucy in during a sick day. We have backup childcare partnerships. And we have a team culture that understands that life happens." Daniel stared at her. "Why are you telling me all this?" "Because you're good at what you do. Your work samples are excellent. Your ideas are fresh. And you've been burning yourself into ash, trying to be 2 parents in a system designed for people with no complications." She paused. "I'd like to offer you the position." "You..." "What?" "I'd like to offer you the senior marketing strategist position. Starting salary is in the folder I'm about to hand you. You'd start Monday if that works for your schedule." Daniel looked down at his hands. They were shaking. "You haven't even asked me about the gaps." "I don't need to. You had a daughter who needed you. That's not a gap. That's called being a parent." For the second time that day, Daniel wanted to cry. This time, he almost did. 3 months into working at Northbridge, Daniel realized something that had been impossible at Sterling. He was present, not just physically, actually present. He made Lucy's breakfast every morning. Real breakfast, not just toast grabbed on the way out the door. He dropped her off at school with time to talk to her teacher. He picked her up at 3:30 every single day, and they'd go to the park or get ice cream or just go home and do homework together. And somehow, impossibly, his work didn't suffer. If anything, it improved. Rachel had been right. When you weren't operating on 4 hours of sleep and constant panic, you actually did better work. Daniel's campaigns were sharper, his pitches more creative, his client relationships stronger. But it wasn't just the schedule that made the difference. It was Rachel. She had a way of managing that felt less like being managed and more like being supported. When Daniel's presentation for the Riverside account went sideways because Lucy had been up all night with a fever, Rachel hadn't reprimanded him. She'd rescheduled the meeting, asked if Lucy was okay, and then casually mentioned that her sister swore by a specific pediatrician if Daniel ever needed a recommendation. When Lucy's school called during a team meeting to say she'd fallen on the playground and needed to be picked up, Rachel had simply said, "Go," before Daniel could even apologize. When Daniel worked late one night to finish a proposal genuinely needed to, not because of arbitrary FaceTime, Rachel had ordered dinner for the office and made sure it included chicken nuggets because Lucy was in the parent room doing homework. She remembered everything about Lucy: her favorite color, her upcoming dance recital, the book series she was obsessed with. Rachel asked about Lucy the way you asked about someone you actually cared about, not the way bosses made small talk. Daniel appreciated it. Of course he did. He just didn't realize what it meant. "Your boss likes you," his friend Marcus had said over drinks one evening. "She's great," Daniel agreed. "Really supportive. The whole team is." Marcus had given him a look. "She's my boss. She's a woman who brings you coffee every single morning, knows your kid's entire schedule, and lights up like a damn Christmas tree whenever you walk into a room." Daniel had laughed. "You're imagining things." But the next morning, when Rachel handed him his coffee made exactly the way he liked it, which he'd mentioned exactly once, 3 months ago, he'd paused. "Thank you," he'd said. "Of course." She'd smiled, quick, warm, and then gone before he could say anything else. It was just being nice. Being a good boss, wasn't it? That Saturday, Lucy had a soccer game. Daniel had mentioned it in passing during a team meeting, mostly to explain why he'd need to leave right at 4:30 that day. When he arrived at the field, Lucy, in her tiny uniform, he saw a familiar figure in the stands: Rachel. Wearing jeans and a Northbridge hoodie, holding a cup of hot chocolate. "Miss Morgan." Lucy had run over immediately. "You came!" "I heard you were playing," Rachel said, kneeling down to Lucy's height. "I couldn't miss it. Your dad says you're really good." Lucy had beamed. "I'm the second best on my team. Madison is the best, but I'm working on it. That's the spirit." Daniel had walked over, confused. "Rachel, you didn't have to. I wanted to." She'd looked up at him, and something in her expression made his words stop. "Is that okay?" "Of course." They'd sat together in the stands. Rachel had cheered for Lucy louder than anyone. When Lucy scored a goal, her first of the season, Rachel had jumped up and grabbed Daniel's arm without thinking. "She did it! Daniel, she did it!" And Daniel had looked at this woman who'd shown up to his daughter's soccer game on her day off, who knew Lucy's favorite color and brought coffee every morning, and thought nothing. Because Daniel Carter, for all his professional competence, was absolutely oblivious. The coffee was the most obvious thing. Every morning, without fail, Rachel appeared at Daniel's desk at exactly 8:47 a.m. with a cup from the coffee shop 2 blocks away. Not the office coffee. The good stuff, with oat milk and 1 pump of vanilla, which Daniel had mentioned he liked exactly once during his first week. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said, for probably the 20th time. "I know," Rachel replied. "Like always, I pass it on my way in," except Marcus had Google mapped it. The coffee shop was not on the way from Rachel's apartment. It was, in fact, a 15-minute detour. Marcus had shown Daniel the map on his phone. Daniel had shrugged. Maybe she likes the walk. Then there were the messages. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that violated any HR policies. Just frequent. Sunday morning. Asterisk. Hope you and Lucy are having a good weekend. Asterisk. Saturday afternoon, after Daniel had mentioned Lucy was nervous about her dance recital. Asterisk. She's going to do great. You both will. Asterisk. Random Tuesday. Asterisk. Saw this article about that book series Lucy likes. Thought you might want to save it for her. Asterisk. Daniel always responded politely. Thanked her. Sometimes sent a picture of Lucy if it was relevant. He never thought it was weird. Bro, Marcus had said, your boss does not text other employees on weekends about their kids' hobbies. She's just friendly. No, I'm friendly. This is different. The seating arrangements were another thing Daniel didn't notice, but everyone else did. At team meetings, Rachel always ended up in the seat next to him. At company lunches, somehow Rachel was across from him. At the quarterly company event at the bowling alley, Rachel had been on his team. It's random assignments, Daniel had said when Marcus pointed it out. Daniel, I organize those events. Rachel specifically asked to be on your team. Why would she do that? Marcus had actually walked away at that point. But the most telling thing, the thing that everyone except Daniel saw, was how Rachel looked at him. She had a professional face for clients, a friendly face for colleagues, a patient face for problems. And then she had the face she used when Daniel talked about Lucy. Soft, unguarded. Like every word mattered more than anything else in the world. Jamie, the junior designer, had pulled Daniel aside after one team meeting. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. Are you and Rachel, like? Daniel had laughed. Actual laughed. What? No. She's my boss. Oh. Jamie had looked genuinely confused. Sorry, I just thought. The way she looks at you, she's just nice. Right. Yeah, nice. Even Lucy had noticed. Miss Morgan is pretty, she'd said one evening while Daniel was making dinner. She is, and she's really nice to us. She is. Do you like her? Of course I like her. She's my boss. Lucy had given him a look that was far too knowing for a 7-year-old. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Nothing. Lucy had gone back to her homework, but Daniel caught her little smile. The entire office knew. The entire office was waiting. And Daniel Carter, brilliant marketing strategist, devoted father, good man, didn't have a clue. The company summer party was at Rachel's house. This should have been Daniel's first clue that this was more than a professional relationship. Rachel didn't host parties at her house. She rented venues. She kept work and personal life separate. But she'd invited the whole team to her backyard for a barbecue, and she'd specifically told Daniel to bring Lucy. Are you sure? Daniel had asked. A kid at a work party seems. Tommy will be there, Rachel had interrupted. And Jamie's bringing her kids. It'll be nice. So Daniel had gone. Rachel's house was beautiful. Not ostentatious, but clearly well cared for. A garden that actually grew things. A patio with string lights. A yard big enough for kids to run around. She'd set up a whole section just for the children. Games. Snacks. You didn't have to do all this, Daniel said when he found Rachel in the kitchen, arranging fruit. I wanted to. She glanced out the window at Lucy, who was laughing harder than Daniel had heard in months. She's having fun. She really is. Daniel felt that familiar tightness in his chest. The good kind. The grateful kind. Thank you. For everything. Not just today, but everything. Rachel's hands stilled on the cutting board. You don't need to thank me. I do, though. You've made this year bearable. More than bearable. You've made it good. She looked at him then. Really looked, and Daniel saw something in her expression that made him pause. But Marcus called his name from outside. Something about the grill. And the moment passed. The party went late. Kids got tired. People started leaving. Eventually, it was just Daniel, Lucy, Marcus, and Rachel left, sitting around the dying fire in the backyard. Lucy had fallen asleep on the outdoor couch, wrapped in a blanket that Rachel had provided without being asked. I should get her home, Daniel said, but he didn't move. Few more minutes won't hurt, Marcus said, though he was checking his phone. Actually, I need to head out, early morning tomorrow. He stood, said his goodbyes, and left. which meant it was just Daniel and Rachel, and Lucy. But she was asleep. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "Can I ask you something personal?" Rachel said suddenly. Daniel looked at her. "Sure. Have you thought about dating again?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Daniel wasn't sure what to say. "Sometimes, maybe. I don't know. It's been almost 2 years. 18 months. Right." Rachel was staring at the fire. "Sorry, I shouldn't have asked. No, it's okay." Daniel tried to organize his thoughts. "I think about it, but Lucy has to be my priority. And after what she's been through, I can't just bring someone into her life unless I'm sure." Really sure. That makes sense. And honestly, Daniel surprised himself by continuing. "I don't even know where I'd meet someone. Between work and Lucy, I barely have time to sleep, let alone date." Rachel nodded slowly. "What if you didn't have to look far?" "What do you mean?" She turned to face him fully. The firelight caught her face, made her eyes bright. "I mean, sometimes the person who's right for you is already in your life. You just haven't noticed them yet." Daniel's brain stuttered. Was she couldn't mean, "I should probably get Lucy to bed," he said, standing up too quickly. Something flickered across Rachel's face. Disappointment, maybe. Or resignation. Of course. She stood too. "Let me help you carry her to the car." They walked in silence. Rachel held the door while Daniel buckled Lucy in. When he turned around, Rachel was closer than he expected. "Daniel," she said quietly, "if you ever do decide you're ready, I hope you know you can talk to me. About anything. I do know that. You're an amazing friend." Friend. The word hung in the air like smoke. "Right," Rachel said. "Friend, good night, Daniel." She went back inside before he could respond. Daniel drove home with the strangest feeling in his chest. Like he'd just missed something important, but he couldn't figure out what. Lucy Carter was 7 years old, which meant adults thought she didn't notice things. They were wrong. Lucy noticed everything. She noticed how Miss Morgan always wore blue on Thursdays because Dad had once mentioned it was his favorite color. She noticed how Miss Morgan's whole face changed when Dad walked into a room like someone had turned on a light inside her. She noticed how Miss Morgan remembered Lucy's favorite snacks and her best friend's name and the title of every book Lucy had ever mentioned. Most importantly, Lucy noticed how Dad was different around Miss Morgan. He smiled more. Real smiles, not the tired ones he gave Lucy when he thought she wasn't looking. He laughed, actually laughed at things, Miss Morgan said. He stood up straighter. He forgot to check his phone every 5 minutes. When Miss Morgan was around, Dad looked like he used to look in old photos with Mom. Happy, relaxed, himself. Lucy was doing homework at the kitchen table one evening when Dad came home from work, humming. He never hummed. "Good day?" Lucy asked. "Yeah. Actually." Rachel, Miss Morgan, she really liked the new campaign concept. Said it was some of my best work. There it was. That tone. The way his voice got softer when he said her name. "Do you like Miss Morgan?" Lucy asked, very carefully. "Of course. She's a great boss." "No, I mean, do you like her? Dad had paused, confused. "What do you mean?" "Like, the way grown-ups like each other. The way you liked Mom." Lucy. Dad had sat down across from her. "Miss Morgan is my boss. She's my friend. That's all. But do you want it to be more?" I haven't really thought about it." That was a lie. Lucy could tell. Dad was thinking about it right now, based on how red his ears were getting. "You smile different with her," Lucy said. "I smile different?" "Yeah. With other people, you smile with just your mouth. With Miss Morgan, you smile with your whole face, like you used to with Mom." Dad had gone very quiet. "I miss Mom," Lucy continued, because this was important and she needed Dad to understand. I miss her every day. But I don't think she'd want you to be alone forever. Lucy, and I really like Miss Morgan. She's nice to me, but not fake nice. Real nice. And she makes you happy. I can tell. Dad had looked at her with shiny eyes. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't pay attention. He'd laughed then, pulled her into a hug. But that night, after Lucy was supposed to be asleep, she'd heard him on the phone with Uncle Marcus. She asked if I like Rachel. Not as a boss, as a... You know. Uncle Marcus's response was too quiet to hear, but Lucy heard Dad's answer clearly. I don't know. Maybe. Is that crazy? More talking from Uncle Marcus. But she's my boss, and Lucy needs stability. Lucy had smiled in the dark. Dad was finally figuring it out. Now she just needed Miss Morgan and Dad to figure it out at the same time. The company retreat was mandatory. Daniel had tried to get out of it. Lucy would need to stay with Marcus for the whole weekend, but Rachel had personally assured him it would be worthwhile. Trust me, she'd said. So Daniel had gone to Lake Crescent, a resort 2 hours outside the city, with the entire Northbridge team. The first day was typical corporate retreat stuff, team-building exercises, trust falls. A surprisingly intense game of trivia that had gotten competitive in ways Daniel hadn't expected. But the evenings were different. The evenings were quiet. Optional. People scattered to their rooms or the hotel bar or the lake itself. Daniel had gone to the lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and pink that reminded him of the paintings Sarah used to love. He sat on the dock, feet dangling over the water, and let himself just be. Mind if I join you? Rachel. Of course. Please. She sat beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something light, floral. They didn't speak for a long time, just watched the sun sink lower. Lucy asked me something the other day, Daniel said eventually. Yeah? She asked if I liked you. Not as a boss, as more. Rachel went very still. What did you tell her? That you were my boss, my friend. And that's all? Daniel turned to look at her. Really look. At the way the sunset caught her face, at the slight vulnerability in her expression, at the way she was holding herself, like she was bracing for impact. I don't know, he admitted. I thought that was all, but then I couldn't stop thinking about it. And Marcus keeps telling me I'm an idiot, and Lucy says I smile differently around you. Do you? I think maybe I do. Rachel's breath caught. Daniel, I'm scared, he interrupted. I'm scared of messing up what we have. I'm scared of Lucy getting attached to someone who might leave. I'm scared of starting something I'm not ready for. He paused. But I'm also scared of missing something that could be important. Important, Rachel repeated softly. You brought coffee every day for 8 months. You came to Lucy's soccer game. You asked about her dance recital and her favorite books and her friend's birthday party. You've been... Daniel struggled for words. You've been present in ways I didn't know I needed. I wanted to be. Rachel looked out at the water. Because the first time I met you, you showed up late and disheveled and clearly falling apart. But the first thing you did before apologizing, before explaining, was check your phone to make sure Lucy got to school on time. And I thought, this is a man who loves his daughter more than anything in the world. She smiled. And then I got to know you, and I realized you're also kind and funny and brilliant and so much stronger than you give yourself credit for. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being able to pretend this was just professional respect. Daniel's heart was pounding. Rachel, you don't have to say anything, she said quickly. I know this is complicated. I know I'm your boss. I know you're still healing. I just needed you to know that if you ever are ready, I'm here. I've been here. Daniel didn't let himself think. Didn't let himself list all the reasons this was complicated. He just leaned over and kissed her. It was soft, brief, a question more than a statement. When he pulled back, Rachel was staring at him with wide eyes. I'm not ready for complicated, Daniel said. But I think I'm ready for this. Rachel kissed him back. And this time, it wasn't brief at all. Monday morning came too soon. Daniel arrived at the office with coffee for one spot at Rachel's favorite shop, with her order memorized. When he placed it on her desk, their fingers touched. The look they exchanged lasted approximately 2 seconds too long. Marcus noticed immediately. Oh my God. What? Daniel tried to look innocent. You didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. You slept with our boss at the company retreat. I didn't, we didn't, Daniel lowered his voice. We just talked. And maybe kissed. Marcus's eyes went wide. Dude, I know. Do you know how much money I'm about to lose on the office pool? The what? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Marcus grinned. Now I don't know. We're keeping it quiet for now. Professional at work. We need to figure out the HR implications and what this means for Lucy and Daniel. Breathe. I'm breathing. You're spiraling. He was. Daniel forced himself to take a breath. We're taking it slow. Except slow was hard when Rachel smiled at him across the conference table, and he had to remember not to smile back the way he wanted to. When her hand brushed his while passing documents, and every nerve in his body lit up, when she sent him a message that said times, miss you times, and he had to resist immediately responding. The team definitely noticed something. Are you feeling okay? Jamie asked on Wednesday. You seem different. I'm fine. You've been smiling at your computer for 10 minutes. I'm just happy with this campaign. By Thursday, even Lucy had picked up on it. You're happy, she said that evening. I'm always happy. No, you're different happy. Did something happen? Daniel considered lying, then remembered that Lucy always knew. Maybe something happened. With Miss Morgan? How did you? Lucy had thrown her arms around him. Finally, we're taking it slow, Luce. It's complicated. It's not complicated. You like her. She likes you. That's easy. If only it were that easy. But keeping things quiet was getting harder. Every time Rachel walked into a room, Daniel's eyes found her automatically. Every time they had a meeting alone, it took longer and longer to actually talk about work. Every time he had to act professional when all he wanted was to hold her hand. It was becoming obvious. The office pool, which Daniel had learned about from Marcus's slip, was apparently getting intense. Bets were being placed on when they'd finally go public, how they'd announce it, whether HR would require one of them to transfer. Should we just tell everyone? Rachel asked during one of their carefully scheduled work meetings that had devolved into making out in her office with the door locked. Maybe. Daniel kissed her neck. Or we could let them wonder. That seems mean. They have a betting pool about us. I know. I'm in it. Daniel pulled back. What? I bet that you'd figure out I liked you by September. I'm about to lose $50. You bet against yourself? I was being realistic. Rachel grinned. I'm getting better. Are you? He kissed her again. I'm motivated. But time was running out. The quarterly strategy meeting was next week. Full team, full presentation, and Daniel was starting to crack under the pressure of pretending. Something was going to give. He just didn't know it would be Rachel. The quarterly strategy meeting was the biggest one of the year. Full team, department heads, even some board members dialing in remotely. Daniel had prepared for weeks. His presentation on the new client acquisition strategy was solid, innovative. The kind of work that could define the next year for Northbridge. He stood at the front of the room, clicking through slides, explaining market analysis and demographic targeting and conversion optimization. Rachel was in her usual seat. Third row, left side, taking notes. Except she wasn't taking notes. She was staring at him. And Daniel, in the middle of explaining social media integration, made the mistake of looking back. Their eyes met. He forgot what he was saying. Sorry, Daniel looked back at his slides. Social media integration, Marcus supplied helpfully. Right. So, as you can see from the data, but he could still feel Rachel looking at him. Focus. He needed to focus. The projected ROI over the next fiscal year shows Daniel clicked to the next slide and froze. It was the wrong slide. This was from a different presentation. A proposal he'd been working on for a potential new client. Personal. Nothing to do with this meeting. Sorry, wrong slide. He clicked back, and that's when Rachel spoke. You're doing that thing again. The room went quiet. Daniel looked up. What? That thing where you apologize for minor mistakes like they're catastrophic failures. Rachel stood up. You've been doing it for months. Every tiny error, every small imperfection. You act like it's the end of the world. Rachel, and I've been trying to show you for almost a year now that you don't have to be perfect, that you're already enough. She stopped, took a breath. Daniel's heart was pounding. Rachel, maybe we should. I love you, you idiot. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. 23 people stared at Rachel Morgan, calm, professional, always composed Rachel Morgan, who had just yelled her feelings in the middle of a quarterly strategy meeting. Daniel stood frozen at the front of the room, remote still in hand. I've loved you for months, Rachel continued, because apparently she was committed now. I bring you coffee every morning. I learned your daughter's entire schedule. I came to her soccer game on my day off. I threw a party and set up a kids area specifically so Lucy would be comfortable. Her voice cracked. How could you not see it? Daniel's brain had stopped working entirely. You smiled at me like I hung the moon at that retreat, and then we came back here and it was like you were terrified to admit what we both feel. And I get it. I'm your boss. It's complicated. But, Daniel, she stepped closer. Life is complicated. Love is complicated. But it's also simple, and I'm tired of pretending. The room was still silent. Then Marcus started clapping. Slowly, deliberately, the way you clap at a wedding. Jamie joined in. Then Tom from accounting. Then everyone else. Daniel looked at Rachel, really looked at her, standing in the middle of the conference room, vulnerable and brave and absolutely terrified. And he did the only thing that made sense. He walked down from the front of the room, straight to her, and kissed her. The room erupted. Cheers! Applause! Someone shouted, finally! When they broke apart, Daniel pressed his forehead to hers. I love you too, he whispered. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure it out. You're very oblivious. So I've been told. Rachel laughed. Kissed him again. From the back of the room, Marcus yelled, Who had October? Show of hands. At least 12 hands went up. I want my money. Someone else shouted. Daniel pulled back. There's really a betting pool? There are 3, Jamie called out. 1 for when you'd get together, 1 for how you'd announce it, and 1 for whether Miss Morgan would crack first, or you would. I'm offended you all bet against me, Daniel said. You didn't notice she loved you for 11 months, Tom pointed out. We were being generous. Rachel buried her face in Daniel's shoulder, laughing. And Daniel, standing in front of his entire company with the woman he loved in his arms, finally felt like everything had clicked into place. 5 years later, Lucy Carter was 12 years old and convinced she was the reason her dad and Rachel had gotten together. She wasn't entirely wrong. If I hadn't told Dad he smiled differently around you, Lucy said, helping Rachel set the table for Sunday dinner. He probably still wouldn't have figured it out. You're probably right, Rachel agreed, because it was easier than arguing. Their house, because it was their Times house now, had been for 3 years, was chaos in the best way. Daniel was in the kitchen with 3-year-old Sophie on his hip, trying to convince her that vegetables were not, in fact, poison. Marcus was in the living room, teaching 7-year-old James how to play chess and losing badly. Check, James said proudly. That's not, you can't, how are you doing this? Marcus stared at the board. Uncle Marcus, you're terrible at chess, Lucy called from the dining room. I'm letting him win. No, you're not. Rachel smiled, watching her family bicker. Her family. That still felt surreal sometimes. She and Daniel had gotten married 2 years ago, in a small ceremony at the same lake where they'd first kissed. Lucy had been the maid of honor. Sophie, only 1 year old at the time, had been the flower girl, and had eaten most of the flowers instead of scattering them. It had been perfect. Blending their family had been not perfect. There had been moments of difficulty. Lucy had struggled with the idea of Rachel not being just Miss Morgan anymore. Sophie had cried for weeks during sleep training. Daniel and Rachel had argued about parenting styles and household responsibilities, and whose turn it was to handle the 3 a.m. wake-up call. But they'd figured it out. Together. Dinner. Daniel called, finally extracting Sophie from the kitchen. They gathered around the table, their chosen family of 2 parents, 3 kids, and 1 honorary uncle who refused to leave. "Before we eat," Lucy announced, standing up with a glass of water like she was making a toast. "I have an announcement." "You're 12, Daniel said. "What kind of announcement could you possibly—" "I got the lead in the school musical." The table erupted. Rachel jumped up to hug her. Daniel joined in. Sophie started clapping even though she didn't understand why. "That's amazing," Rachel said. "When are performances?" "Next month." "And before you ask, yes, you're all required to come." Multiple times. "Wouldn't miss it," Daniel promised. After dinner, after Sophie was in bed and James was working on homework and Marcus had finally gone home, Daniel found Rachel on the back porch. She was sitting in the same chair she'd sat in that night of the company party, 5 years ago, when she'd asked about dating and he'd been too oblivious to understand. "Hey," Daniel said, sitting beside her. "Hey, yourself." He took her hand, ran his thumb across her wedding ring. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That party. The one where I basically asked you out and you didn't notice." Daniel groaned. "Are we still talking about that? I will bring it up until we're 90. I was grieving. And oblivious. And an idiot," Rachel finished, smiling. "I'm glad you finally figured it out, you idiot." The phrase had become their inside joke, their reminder of that moment in the conference room when everything had changed. "I love you," Daniel said, because he could say it now. Easily. Often. "I love you too." Inside, they could hear Lucy laughing at something on her phone. Sophie's music box playing softly through the baby monitor. James asking Alexa increasingly complex questions about space. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd kept ignoring it?" Daniel asked. "Every day," Rachel admitted. "And then I remember that I snapped in the middle of a meeting and yelled at you in front of the entire company, and I think about how absolutely mortifying that was. It was the hottest thing anyone's ever done." "You're ridiculous." "You're ridiculous." Rachel leaned her head on his shoulder. "Yeah. You are." They sat there as the sun set, exactly like they had 5 years ago. But everything was different now. Better. Lucy appeared at the door. "Dad?" "Sophie's awake again. Of course she is." Daniel stood, kissed Rachel's forehead. "Be right back." But before he went inside, he turned back. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For loving Lucy before you loved me. For being patient with an idiot who took way too long to figure out what was right in front of him." Rachel smiled. That smile that made him feel like he was the only person in the world. "Anytime, idiot. Now go get your daughter before she wakes up James too." Daniel went, and Rachel sat in the gathering dark, listening to her family, and thought about how sometimes the best love stories were the ones where you had to yell your feelings in a conference room. Worth it. Absolutely worth it.